Welcome one at sunset with your host Maponga Joshua. I'm the watcher from the future, living with you in the present with solutions from the past. Before we can even start cutting the text as we have spoke last week, it will be important for on this particular session that we go back a little bit, one step back, one step forward. That's how we move in this world. One step to the left, one step to the right, until we find that middle ground that is important for all of us. For today, I want us to dive into the subject of the biblical text and its authenticity, a bit here and there of its historicity, and within that be able to start talking in terms of the history of the biblical text and how we can begin to look at it as people who own the text. I've had to deal and grapple at length with the struggle that Jomo Kenyatta mentioned in one of his books, where he said the white man or the European came here with the Bible, and he gave us the Bible. And while we were busy reading the Bible with our eyes closed in our prayer time, the white man took the land and he ran away, and we remained with the text. Well, that argument sounds a bit quite political, but if that is true, then it means that the African owns the Bible twice. We own it by buying it with our own land. And secondly, we own it because the history of the Bible is an African history. You will be naive to think that as of the 1950s, when the Suez Canal was dug to separate Africa from now what you call Middle East. In the old maps, what you now call the Middle East was actually called North Africa. North Africa. Therefore, Africa did not only stretch up to Egypt, it stretched right up into the Middle East. Is it not funny to you that Madagascar, which is a couple of hundreds of kilometers away from Africa, is considered as part of Africa? Yet, Israel, which is actually separated by a canal, it is deemed as Middle East. How did politics divide our continent into a political map? That will be a subject for another day. However, I want to come back again to the biblical text and ask ourselves, when you have this text that is now in our hands, up to a time when we have it translated by the King James himself, what happened between creation and the 1600s when King George decided to translate the Bible into English and from English into all other nations? I would not have enough time and the abundance and the luxury of research to take you through the development of the text itself, from the Jewish and the Hebrew Torah into the writings of the prophets, then pass over into the Ethiopian context, move you into the Roman and the Vulgates, take you into the writings of the Gutenbergs, into the British translations of the KJV, New International Versions, and New English Bibles, the Good News, the Gideons, the missionaries, and ultimately the text that you're holding in yourself. However, the question of the authorship of the Bible remains critical, because if we are going to be saying this is the rule of faith, the question is which part of it is historically correct and which part of it could be useful for developing our own faith. Now, there we go. We need to make an assumption, big assumption, across all religions, across all cultures, across all civilizations. And the argument I want to present to us is called the ontological argument, which presents to us that behind every design, there is a designer. Now, some of you look at my wonderful clothes that I'm putting on this afternoon. There is a designer who made this beautiful shirt that you're looking at right here. Look at my nice, expensive shoes. There is a designer who sat down to design these beautiful shoes that you're seeing here. Look at my belts, designers that are behind there. Look at my clothing that I'm putting on my face here. Beautiful designs. Of course, the hat is my own design. It's my own baby. I made this myself. Therefore, you understand that for you to have something that you can now look at in the physical realm, there's always been, as always will be, that a designer sits down, thinks through his design, decides how he's going to make it. And because I'm a creative person, both on the musical side and on the artistic side, I know what it means to sit around and think and say, how do I want this head to look like? Okay, I want the head to look like a Jewish kippah, a little bit there. I want the head to look like religions of the Muslims, it's there. I want the head to look like the bit of an African, it is there. I want the head to look, so I sit around and I decide exactly how I want this piece of head I hold in my hand to look and feel. Therefore, there is power in someone being a designer, someone being a creator. Creator means you are able to translate from idea into a practical thing. There is a way in which you can change your thoughts into things. Now there you are, changing your thoughts into things. There is a general understanding that we need to present to all of us, that there is a creator. There is a creator. Whatever you call him can become an issue of religious debate. And we will argue until the cows come home. But there is a creator. From the most primitive amongst us, quote unquote primitive. From the most uneducated amongst us, quote unquote uneducated. From the most uncultured amongst us, quote unquote uncultured. Every human being on the face of the earth has an understanding, an edge, and a siege in their heart that there is someone who created something to become. In the words of St. Augustus, there is an emptiness that lies in the hearts of mankind. And only until God moves in, that person remains empty forever. We can try to fill up this emptiness with sex. We can buy our drugs. We can buy our houses. We can buy our cars. We can get our names for ourselves, build up industries, have many children, fill up your houses with wardrobes and clothes and garages with automobiles and everything else. At the end of the day, that emptiness still remains lingering in the corridors of your heart. Did you not hear the song that was sung by the famous American? But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And while he's saying that, he's sitting in a room full of friends. His garage full of cars. His bank account full of money. And the man sits on his lounge and he whips the prayer that goes through all our minds. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Therefore, the emptiness in our hearts, I want to call that a God emptiness. A God emptiness. One writer once wrote and said, I almost became an atheist until I discovered the same God I was running away from, he lives inside me. In fact, me and him are one. That sounds like Jesus speaking in the book of John. I and my Father are one. He is in me. I am in him. And then Paul echoes and says, God in us, the hope of glory. Why is it that Christianity is scared of giving God residence in their hearts, residence in their homes? There is this famous theology that we always run around preaching. Accept Jesus as your personal savior. Take him into your heart. And look around and say, do you really understand what it means to accept Jesus into your heart? Do you know what it means to accept divinity into your life? Do you know what it means to empty the entire heavens and put it inside your life? Well, we will go through some of these subjects here on at Sunset. But on an introduction, let me be quick to say that there is nothing wrong with us beginning to understand as Africans that for you to be either a Christian, for you to be a culturalist, for you to believe in anything, you need to be occupied by that which you believe in. Boom, there you have it. Therefore, you believe in that, it must occupy you. You believe in that, it must occupy you. And whatever occupies you, governs you, rules you, and directs you in terms of your life. Come with me. If we understand that there is God in creation, you go to the Zulus, Umdali, the one who makes. You go to the Sutus, Ramaseli, the Ra of the day, the light of the day, the omnipotent himself. You go to the Shona people, Musikavano, Musika, Msika is that small piece of wood that we use as shonas when we are making our pap that has many spikes around it. You put it inside water, you put some milli in there, and then you go like this. When you are doing that in shona, we call that kusika. Then when you have musika, musika is the stick, vanu are people. So musika vanu, which is the name we attribute to God, means the one who mixed up the races and made up this beautiful dish we now call pap. But inside this pap is humanity. You walk up into any African culture, and I'm saying so contextually because I'm in Africa. Any African culture, the one who became and began the beginning. Nkulu. That one is a bit more complicated for the younger viewers. Because apparently when the Europeans came to KwaZulu-Natal and they were asking, so, who is your God? And the Zulu people said, Ngumkhulu wabomkhulu. Mkhulu kunabomkhulu. In other words, he is older than our grandfathers. Therefore, he is the older of the older grandfathers. Umkhulu wabomkhulu. And because the white men found that to be a bit more complicated, to say umkhulu wabomkhulu, they compressed the word to become nkulunkulu. But nkulunkulu simply means the one who sits in the history of our nations. When we call our ancestors and we call our forefathers and those that were born before us, if we keep on calling and connecting all of them, we may just find at the end of the calling names that there is someone who started everything else, which has become part of us. Therefore, studying ourselves and studying etymology and African languages across the whole African continent, you can not fail to find the presence of God. Nigeria, they might want to call him Igwe. In other places, they might want to call him, Mulungu. In other areas, they might want to call him the great rainmaker, the one who causes it to rain. If you get to the Tonga people, he's the one who lives in the smokes that thunders, that in the Great Mosiatunya. But what am I saying is that Africans have a name for God. The European did not bring God to Africa. He found God here. Because when you walk into any nation, they did not introduce Yahweh to us. We knew him before they even came to tell us about a blue-eyed boy with white blonde hair that they called Jesus. So we want to make an assumption first, big assumption, that before we study the text, we must understand that there is someone who created everything that we have. In that similar sense, there is a designer behind every design. There is a designer behind every design. I'll put a small little slash on evolution for the purposes of the academic people. Evolution says, given enough time, everything that is not there can become. Well, that takes quite a bit of faith, because it means that you can be walking in the bush one day and you will find that rubber went to look for paint. Paint went to look for metal. Metal went to look for leather. Leather went to look for plastic. And they all gathered together in a small little meeting. And when you are walking in the jungles of the bush, boom, you find an AMG, vroom, 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 in the bush all by itself. Because things are able to become without anyone causing them to become. Now, those of you who are academic, let's go together. This is the law of cause and effect. Behind every effect, there is a cause. Follow carefully. There is a cause which affects and effects anything. There is a designer who makes things happen. All of us are here. We are our father's children. We are our mother's children. What does it mean? We come out of them to become what we have now become. You will be a fool of the highest order to think that you fell from the heavens, as we hear on some of our TV shows. Where did human beings begin? And then you are shown a small little stalk that is flying around with a bag in front of it, and inside the bag there is a nice little child, and then our children are taught, where did the baby come from? Oh, the stalk brought the baby here. Stop lying. There are no stalks anywhere. There are no birds that fly with children into existence. Children are made. Behind every child is a designer. And what you see on the DNA on the person what you see on their looks, what you see on their body structure, what you see on their complexion, what you see on them has nothing to do with them, but those that lived before these ones were made. Therefore, you look at my scruffy African hands. These ones, I don't even need lotion on them and Vaseline. I need to soak them in fish oil so that they can soak and really become nice and also look civilized. But I have a natural dry skin. I did not buy this skin anyway. I was born with this skin. What does it mean, therefore? Everything that I am. Look at the structure of my face. Look at the structure of my hands. Look at the structure of my teeth. Even the gap that you find on my teeth here, my grandfathers, my uncles, and everybody else have these same structures. Look on my side. Was it not of the beards? I'll be showing you a dimple that is on my left chin here. You cannot see it nicely. All these things are part of the package of design from where I'm coming from. Therefore, we want to make a first, most important pronouncement on top of the program while you're beginning at sunset, your program, that anyone who reads the text must believe that there is a creator. And this creator does not begin with his creation. The creator must be there before creation begins. Follow me carefully. We are talking therefore about the creator, umdali, musikawano, who does not begin when people begin, but he begins the people. Hear me well. We talk about the creator who begins the beginning, but does not begin in the beginning. For the one who begins the beginning must be there before the beginning begins. And this is an acceptable principle across the entire terrain of the African cultures. Even those who say, I don't believe in God. It's okay not to believe in God, but you still must believe that for you to say, I don't believe in God, it means you are alive. And for you to be alive, two people met. And two people met because the other two people met. And the two people met because the other two people met. And the two people who met. Do whatever you want to do in terms of your research. Ultimately, you might have just to confront the honest truth that for you to be a human being who is alive, there should have been a creator prior to you coming into existence. I want to move over slightly into some academic space, then it can make sense. When do we begin to have the appearance of the Hebrew people with the written Torah? The Torah begins off with the lives of Abraham and the lives of Jacob and Isaac. And in this writing, penning itself out into Moses, who becomes the first writer of the book of Genesis, the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, and the book of Numbers, which we call the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. However, you will be again naive to think that this is where writing begins. Oops. Because before Moses wrote the Pentateuch, take note that there was already a civilization of the Egyptians, the civilization of the Akkadians, civilizations of Kemet, which are a few thousand years older than the Torah. A few thousands of years older than the writings of the Pentateuch. I know this might sound like a shocker to many of you, but the Bible in its writings gives us a history of a people at a certain given time, not necessarily trying to disprove the fact that before this beginning began, there's nothing that was happening on the face of the earth. Moses had lived in Egypt for the longest part of his life. His nation had been kept there for more than 400 years. For crying out loud, the Jews no longer remembered, the Hebrews no longer remembered what it was like to believe in God. Here is the shocker for some of you. Abraham comes into the picture. Who is the pastor of Abraham? It is Melchizedek himself, the priest and the prince and king of Salem, who is pastoring to Abraham. And as Abraham has come from collecting the gifts after rescuing his brother Lot, collected the cattle, the sheep, and everything else, sitting under a tree outside of his tent, taking a breath after a long period in battle. There, Melchizedek walks past the yard. Abraham invites Melchizedek into his tent to which Melchizedek shares a meal with him. Melchizedek ministers to him. Melchizedek blesses him. After Melchizedek has done all these things, then Abraham says, on your way out of my house, you can't just go with nothing. Please take 1/10 of everything that I have plundered. Take it with you as tithes and offerings. That is the first time the word tithe appears in the Bible. It is when Abraham actually gave Melchizedek his blessing. But the message is not there. Abraham had his wife called Sarah. And Sarah had Isaac. And out of Abraham also comes Hagar. Hagar had Ishmael. Out of Abraham also comes Keturah. Keturah, who had Midian, who had Joshkin, and other children. From Midian, then we have another son who is called Jethro. So take note that Isaac and Jethro are actually brothers. Isaac and Midian are actually brothers from the same father. The advantage is when Israel, through Jacob, went into slavery, Jethro, Joshkin, Midian remained in the Holy Land. When Israel was getting contaminated in the foreign land, take note, the purity of the worship of Yahweh was still in the Middle East. I want you to take that part very seriously, because that becomes the crux of our understanding. So when Moses had lost all his history in Egypt, and he committed his crime, and he was running away, thank you, then Moses runs straight into the house of Jethro, sitting by the well, fights a few battles for the boys who were at the well. Wow. And there the girls come out, the girls of Jethro, to meet up with Moses, who had done such a good favor for them. Who is he? Bring him home with you. Moses is given residence in the house of Jethro. It is when Moses is sitting with Jethro. Now we get the connection. When Moses is sitting with Jethro, Moses, who had forgotten all his history about the Jewish and the Hebrew people, it is Jethro. And by the way, for classification purposes, Jethro, a black man, born from Keturah, a black woman, Joshkin, a black man, Midian, a black man, Moses' wife, a black woman, Moses himself being Hebrew. Well, a debate for another day, whether Moses was white or Moses was black. I leave that for your own consideration, for those of you who like researching much more. But it will be very interesting to argue the life of the European in North Africa during this era. It will be very interesting to notice how you can make Abraham white when Abraham is coming out of Ur of the Chaldees. And Ur of the Chaldees is a city which is now called Iraq. Iraq was built by Nimrod. Nimrod, who is the son of Cush. Cush, who is the son of Noah. And Cush himself, son of Ham, is a black man. Fact in your Bible. So if Abraham was called from Ur of the Chaldees, I don't know when Abraham, who is coming from Babylon, who is coming from Ur of the Chaldees, a city of the Cushites, how does a Cushite come out as a black man and ends up giving birth to white children? I leave that to those who want to research. But the tradition of the European was to rush to that text quickly and say, well, Shem is whites, these ones are Indians, and only Ham are the blacks. Well, you will need to stretch your faith far much more. Because if you are smart enough, you will understand that God created human beings out of the dust of the ground. Next time you see white dust, come and greet me, please. All dust is as brown as I know it. Therefore, the first human being to be created on the face of the earth, I will not be embarrassed to say this, it's a black man. Yes, it's a black man. Bantu. Here, you have it. So Moses sits with Jethro. Jethro then educates him, and he says, in the beginning, God. Wow! It is here now that Moses must now start writing. Where do I know that from? From the book of Acts. Moses was taught in all knowledge, all wisdom, all treasury, weaponry, and military intelligence of the Egyptians. Moses could read and write. It is then that the oral tradition of Jethro, which he received from Midian, which he received from Abraham, which he received from Melchizedek, who had been speaking to God. Then Abraham taught his children these things. In case you were just getting excited, I will stop a little bit and tell you. And Abraham looks at the children and says, I don't want these children of Hagar and the children of Keturah to eat this thing together with my child. He gave them the gold. Come on with me there. He gave them myrrh. Hello, somebody. He gave them the frank incense in the book of Genesis, and he sent them to the east. Boom. There you have it. Then come with me to the book of Matthew. When Yeshua is born, then we hear that 3 wise men came from the east. Hello? What did they bring with them? They brought back the gold. They brought the myrrh. Hello? And they brought also the frankincense. Now, you will not understand how this thing that happened in Genesis manifests itself in the book of Matthew. And somehow we decide to ignore such overwhelming evidence on the authenticity of the Bible and the presence of the black man within the biblical text itself. Jethro then dictates to Moses, in the beginning, God, in the beginning, Yah created the heavens and the earth. And Moses begins to write this. Take note, another mistake we make, it is to consider that the Bible then must become historically accurate to the T. This is information which has leaps and bounds of thousands of years as the story is being related. You know very well that Methuselah lived 900 years plus. How much can you write in 900 years? Therefore, when you read between chapter 1 and chapter 2, verse 1 and verse 4, verse 5 and verse 6 of the book of Genesis chapter 4, so-and-so gave birth, so-and-so gave birth, so-and-so. You must understand within those giving birth to so-and-so, there are hundreds of years that are incubated right there with thousands of historical stories that have not been written. I've heard some people asking me, where did Cain get his wife? Don't be so myopic. There are thousands of years which are in conversation within the smaller biblical narrative. And in this perspective, the first thing I want us to agree on before we go very far, let us agree that there is a beginning. And in the beginning, there is someone who started off the beginning. The question I have for you today is, when God is beginning the universe, what are you beginning in your own life? When God is starting things, what things have you started in your own life? How much chaos is in your life? And how much restlessness is in your life? How much darkness is sitting over your potential? And what will it take for God to say, let there be, and there shall be? At sunset, when we visit the biblical narrative and finding our own history, the Jew and Gentile, the European and the African, we must find our Genesis in the hands of Him who created us. And no nation is superior to another, for in Him we have our being. At sunset, with Maponga J. Meet you again next week.